This is XRTV.
So we're at the closing procession of the 2-week rebellion. It's the red-handed procession who are walking past government departments to not only show their guilt in the climate emergency, but also to acknowledge their own.
We're filming this segment right now as the introduction to the show that's coming out to you because Ronan kind of wants to get arrested.
I used to... I think if that's not confirmation from the universe that I should get arrested,
Why do you want to get arrested?
because in this building here, the Foreign Office, I used to work as a scenario planner looking at the future, what the world of 2030 is going to look like, and that's really where my climate awakening happens. So it feels right that I would return in order to demand that they do more by getting arrested right now.
Wow. You see, when I hear that, I'm like, there are so many people in this movement who've had their awakening at different times, that they were trying their best to make the world a better place in a million different ways and found out that actually, like, they couldn't, and that they had to just come out here on the streets and participate in non-violent direct action and civil disobedience in order to do the thing that they know that their life is here for.
Yeah, and so we're running out of building space, so I'm going to go just in case now is the moment. But enjoy the show. It's hard to get arrested around here.
You keep trying to get arrested?
I think I'm just realizing at this point that I'm actually quite bad at getting arrested.
I tried to. Where did you go the other night? I thought you'd been arrested then.
Yeah, I was going to defy Section 14 and I just kind of wandered around for quite a length of time and no one just really wanted anything to do with me, so I went home.
Wow, you literally can't even hand yourself in.
Well, interestingly, the red-handed procession today ended with people with red hands handing themselves into the station.
Wow.
But they were pretty sure that at that stage the police were like, just go home.
Please, like, no, just go home.
But what's interesting is that that red-handed procession was also about putting our own hands up and saying, you know, we're guilty as well. Mm-hmm. And that really was speaking to the mood and the movement after what is kind of roundly being perceived as a terrible faux pas, the tube disruption yesterday.
The tube thing, yeah.
And so we're going to take you to the dramatic moments yesterday.
That was perfect.
Protest now, you safety. Do it on the right. No one touch you. They're going to arrest everyone. Not me. Arrest them.
So this was a massive own goal for a number of reasons. One, we know that the majority of the movement actually voted not to do it, but it went ahead because because the movement is autonomous, and as long as you're operating within the values and the principles, you can do what you want. But I think there's a lot of pain and resentment about a lot of people saying, please don't do this, this is a terrible idea.
It's a challenge to the democratic processes of the movement when people who have, you know, they've seen that the majority aren't supporting them and they go ahead with something anyway. It's like, wow, there was a real sense of betrayal, I thought.
Yeah, there was, and then also the movement sits with a tension between democracy and the majority opinion, and then also people who feel they actually might have the right idea moving ahead. And it's really difficult to know, and I think that it's for all of us to have these conversations moving forward. But I think the bigger own goal was, choosing Canning Town. Canning Town is one of the biggest areas like for the working class, 0-hour contracts, and it's, the optics of, a middle class person standing on a train down in front of a crammed group of people who are heading into, difficult jobs.
Okay, so they're going into difficult jobs, and yes, they're on 0-hour contracts. I totally understand that. But I really, it makes me very sad that people, rather than rising up to address the climate crisis in our masses, because it will take the masses to actually really change the system, instead they just want to, They want. It's like they're fighting for the system. When they're fighting somebody who's trying to save their lives in order to save their jobs, it's like, nah, fam, you're on the wrong side.
Yeah, and I also want to stand up for. I'm trying to get to work. If I don't turn up at 9 o'clock, I lose my day's shift. I see someone on top of the train. I'm like, get off that train. But ultimately, if these are just our opinions, these are our personal opinions, and I think it's good to also just hear from the movement and start a wider conversation.
I wasn't put off yet by what happened yesterday, but I had lots of conversations with friends about it. It felt like it was a poor decision, but I understand that when you have such a fluid situation, a non-hierarchical movement, these things happen.
So I think it was unfortunate that it happened in the way it did, but I feel like it's sort of emblematic of where we've got to in this fight, that we people are taking actions that are maybe not necessarily that come from a place of fear and desperation.
I didn't know it was going to go ahead. We all had a vote and we all thought it wasn't going to go ahead. When I saw it on Twitter feed, obviously it was distressing, and actually throughout the day yesterday, my sympathies are actually with the activists.
I found it quite aggressive, the action that was taking place by the commuters. I didn't feel that it was a very safe environment to be in. And I felt that the action was perhaps not thought out too well.
Well, it's a tricky question really, because it is very disruptive to the everyday person, and it will gather us a lot of hate and people getting against us, but it's also like to get to the system we need to go through the individual really. So I think we need to find a balance between acting against the government and compromising the system, and I think the tube is a way of stopping a lot of people getting to their jobs and therefore stopping the system.
I think that it was potentially misguided. I know that there was a lot of issue with the location in particular, and whether or not people think it's right or wrong, it's done now, and I think what's important is that we come together in the spirit of XR.
I really feel this somberness. People are holding so much, but I don't know, that kick, I really feel like this line was crossed.
Yeah, a line was crossed, and we're a non-violent movement, and that was a violent action. Mm-hmm. And whatever you say about should we have targeted the tube, should we have targeted Canning Town, should they have listened to the majority, all of those are opinion, but the red line was violence. But I also want to have wholesome empathy for that man who was faced with a baying mob.
Right.
And if someone was to reach up onto a train and try and pull me into a mob, what would I do?
Standing up, it's definitely, it looked frightening. There's so much, like you say, there's so many different ways to see what happened, and it's been really helpful bumping into people that you've seen at many of the different protests and rallies, and people getting up and talking or organising things in deep presence and support, and we caught up with one of those earlier on today. Yeah?
Really good.
So Rupert, how are you feeling about yesterday morning's tube action?
Well, I guess what I'd like to say to anyone in the public really is that we're learning, we make mistakes, we're sorry when we make mistakes, and we're learning, and that's all we can do as human beings who are trying to do something really important really hard, really desperate, and we're sorry when we get things wrong. That's it, really.
That was Rupert Reed from XR's political circle.
I want to get a dog and call him Rupert.
I once had a budgie and I called him Edward Said after the father of Orientalism.
I just like the name Rupert. It's difficult to imagine how to move on from that tube action. I like, working in political circle, being on the WhatsApp group, so it was just this sense of a kind of shock, and maybe we should just call off the whole rebellion, and this almost feeling of wanting to hide and go home. And yet, once again, rebels turned out, again, the next morning, and we're going to take you to the moment where they occupied Oxford Circus.
It's becoming an increasingly familiar sight. Another of London's busiest junctions brought to a standstill by rebels. It's almost a fortnight since the opening ceremony, but activist efforts show no signs of abating. Today's target, Oxford Circus, the scene of days of lively protest by Extinction Rebellion in April. At 9:30, a whistle was blown to signify the beginning of the end of the October Rebellion. After 12 days of persistent protest, rebels managed to muster their last remaining energy reserves to kick off a final day of action. At the sound of the whistle, demonstrators had in minutes erected a pyramid, with some clambering to perches at the top and many more bolting on at the base of the structure. Police soon descended on the roadblock and cordoned off the junction, separating those who were prepared to risk arrest from the rest of the crowd. To the casual observer, it was not immediately clear that this is a movement banned from assembling in groups of 2 or more in London. As usual, there was plenty of singing.
Oh, we got all the science, all that we need. Let's let me.
And drumming. But as ever, the arrests were the more stirring elements of the morning's entertainment. As bolt-ons were led away by police, the familiar whoops, cheers and cries of "I love you" and "thank you" filled the air. One activist reminded XRTV that these actions are not an occasion for celebration.
Sad this is necessary. Hope we don't have to do this for too much longer.
Some were led, others were carried away, adding their names to the over 1,700-strong list of rebels arrested during the Autumn Uprising.
Move! This is how we win. This is how we win.
Left, pavement to the left.
Well done, we're proud of you.
We love you and your children. We love our planet.
Hundreds were present to watch as a cherry picker was brought in to pluck those who had taken the higher positions on the pyramid from their perch. As they were brought down, they received perhaps the biggest cheer of all.
Wow, there has been so much going on in the last 12 days. There's stuff happening all over 60 cities, but just in London, we've had women, mothers breastfeeding outside of Downing Street. We've had grandparents willing to get arrested outside the gates of Buckingham Palace. There have been youth demanding that YouTube holds itself to account. We've had scientists outside the Bank of England. We've got farmers on Whitehall. We've got an interfaith community that has developed just holding down a food feast protest outside of Millbank. I mean, if you can remember anything that you've seen or just moments that you really stayed like the meditations or anything, write it in the comments. Definitely let us know what moved you in this rebellion. I'm just how are we going to hold all of this together?
Well, I think what holds it all together is beauty. It's this overwhelming feeling of everyone contributing everything they can, and it's almost too much to hold and too much to process, and yet we must. And all of those actions, they really speak to it's like a tour of our broken system.
Wow.
Where you're experiencing the power and the vested interests that run the show, but also our deep vulnerability within that. But at the centre of it all is the government, and it is their capacity to be a systems-changing system in its own right. It is its capacity to regulate. And so it was fitting that the 2-week rebellion ended as we began, processing through the major government departments, asking them what is their plan, showing that if they don't produce one, they will be caught red-handed.
Have you ever been caught red-handed? When I was 9, I stole a packet of Skittles from a local Tesco, and I just about made it out the door before the security guard stopped me. But this has an order of magnitude more seriousness. Today, the closing of 2 weeks of rebellion, it will end with a procession through Whitehall, where people will don their hands in red and mark them on 6 government departments, asking them the question of the rebellion: what is your plan? They will read demands from the Emergency People's Speech, a contrast to the Queen's speech on Monday, which dedicated 6 words to climate change and made no reference of climate emergency. With all the controversy surrounding Extinction Rebellion in the last 24 hours, this returns to the basic underlying purpose of why we've come together. If it's an emergency, what is your plan? I'm joined by Roz and Tara at the beginning of the red-handed procession. You can see their hands are covered in what looks like berries. Were they picked? Were the berries picked in this local park?
It's actually beetroot.
It's actually beetroot.
100% organic.
Made by a mum behind us, actually.
Very on brand. Look, and we can see behind us, just before we go to talk to these, that this is the painting of the red-handed. So first of all, the idea behind this action is that actually people will be marking the government departments to basically demand that they produce their plans. Are you arrestable today? Are you planning to be marking the government departments with this delicious beetroot?
I'm not arrestable today, but I feel like it's important to be together and to show the importance of the situation that we're in at the moment globally, that it affects everybody, and that we have all contributed to the state that our world is in at the moment. And definitely the question of like, what is the plan? What are we going to do? How are we going to come together and solve this issue before it's too late?
They have done nothing, they haven't even acknowledged it. The police have grown increasingly violent, it's not their fault. And it just feels like we need to do something stronger to ask them what they're going to do.
We're gonna rise like the border. We're gonna shut this system down. I hear the voice of my great-granddaughter saying, climate justice now.
So behind me you see the procession. It's about to go to the first government department, the Department of International Trade. What's most interesting about that department is that its funding for overseas fossil fuel projects has been increased by 11-fold in the last year, twice as many as renewables. And really that core narrative, asking governments what is your plan, has been really kind of missing from the public agenda, which is fixated on our identity being crusties and our tactics being, targeting tubes. And actually we're in this procession we see us returning to that just basic question, what is your plan? And what's been interesting is that in that media conversation, that climate emergency, the emotional feeling of actually that this is an emergency as opposed to, yeah, I get it, hasn't really landed. And so the question today is, can this procession really drive home that most basic message? It's the new cocaine.
We've got the rave later, some of the vitamins for that.
Are we having a rave?
And then fight again. Teach the song to the people behind you. Make sure those...
Well, I'm hearing similar things across the rebellion. I've been here for the whole time, and that's the preciousness of connection and the preciousness of community. People are just loving being in this community.
There's so much hope that people get from connection in this group, in this crowd. Yeah.
Service for humanity and all species on Earth. Well done.
We're outside number 10 Downing Street. The procession is moving from major government departments to major government department, and the red hand is now signifying so many different things. It is the red hand and the guilt of the government in not producing a plan on climate emergency. It's our own admission of potentially the mistakes we have made in this rebellion, particularly in light of the tube action and the anger and the hurt that that's caused. But fundamentally, there is an invitation.
Sarah, is London the centre of the universe?
Oh, no, Ronan. It's the centre of colonialism. But seriously though, we know that London isn't the only place that's having a rebellion right now. There's been some epic images and news out there, and we are so fortunate tonight to have different stories coming in from Gambia and from Belgium and from
Germany,
yes! I mean, sorry, there was like so many phone calls with all these like different potential possible ones all day, but these are the three we got, and we're really happy to share them with you now.
That was perfect.
Hi, International Rebels. This is Luyen reporting for XR Germany. We've had a full week of packed actions in Berlin with 6,000 people who came out. We had 5 bigger blockades. So Monday morning on the 7th in the wee hours, people were going through parks and in the dark started occupying a central point called the Great Star. And they stayed there for 52 hours. This was our first blockade, which saw a lot of singing and dancing. We built a boat called Arche Rebella, referring to the boat from the Bible. Another personal highlight was holding a speech on top of a truck to a crowd of 2,000 people, reading out the open letter to the environmental ministry, asking them to do their job and reminding them that they still don't tell the truth. So yeah, Rebellion Wave in Berlin was a great success. We got lots of media attention. People started discussing civil disobedience as a political instrument, and a lot of people were thrown into activism for the first time, and I think we did a good job to reach out to Berliners.
There was a lovely atmosphere, groups of people holding assemblies about the climate emergency. There was a live band, some people were making art, and then all of a sudden, with no warning, the square was surrounded by riot police with sticks, shields and dogs. I managed to find my wife and my son, and we managed to get out of the square. And then all hell broke loose. We saw a line of policemen attacking groups of people with pepper spray on the edge of the square, mostly families, some older people I saw, and even tourists.
Hi there, I'm Simi all the way from Gambia. Our group is young. We started last year, but we are so happy that we are now working with Extinction Rebellion International and also part of Excellent, that Extinction Rebellion Africa. So organizing XR event is a little bit tough because you have to deal with permit with the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education if you are to merge with the students, plus you have to write to the Office of the Inspector General. So they have to screen you, they have to ask you a lot of questions, but we always have positive response from the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education and the police, because they know the impacts of climate change. They know that this is really happening and then is happening at an alarming rate. So their response is always positive. So I'm happy that we are working with them, and then they are helping us move faster. So the ecological breakdown in my country is really bad, because my government now is selling our forests to real estate agencies, and now they are building estates.
Amazing footage, and a reminder that this is global, and a perspective that it's so easy to get caught up in the local drama, the tube action, when really it's a global movement. It's happening all over the world, and whatever our drama might be in London or in the UK, there's a similar drama, there's a similar struggle.
It's just going down out there.
And like, you know, you might have the police in Belgium, you might have like a certain incident in Germany, and it's a reminder that we're holding this together, and that that's something that we can fall back into. We can know that we're not carrying it on our own, we're carrying this together. And with all of that action all around the world, it's almost difficult to comprehend. How do you honor that? How do you bring that to some kind of meaningful closing?
I think the thing that unites all of these different places that are rising is a connection to ceremony. Ceremony, to gather in circles, to gather in song, to offer dances to each other, to turn to each other, to remember. This is something that no single culture owns. It's just something, it's like as a human animal, we hear so much in this movement that, you know, we are just nature defending itself. And actually the human animal, when it comes to bring meaning and power to something, it gathers in ceremony. And we began this show as some wild idea to do a live broadcast of an opening ceremony of a rebellion. Because it was like, yes, you know, like this is something important to show the world. And it was a real joy to be able to go to the closing ceremony tonight, which after a few dodgings around the place and like police being in one place, police being in another place, it was held at Trafalgar Square, a site that has meant so much to London's rebellion. Let's see how that evening went.
Extinction! Rebellion! Extinction! Rebellion! Whose rivers? Our rivers! Whose rivers? Our rivers!
We're here in Trafalgar Square for the closing ceremony of this 2-week rebellion. It's the final step in what feels like a marathon.
It's really important to remember that this is not the end of Extinction Rebellion. This is a moment of transition when we come out of the autumn uprising and continue our open rebellion in other ways and in other times and in other places.
I'm reminded of an expression at Shabbat in Jewish culture: the work is not done, but it's time to stop. And in this pausing, it's an opportunity to really come into ceremony and to really be still together and to really reflect on this raw journey, the raw journey of the last 2 weeks.
This moment of reflection and reconciliation, I think, couldn't come soon enough for rebels who've been out in the streets for 2 weeks, who've experienced increasing challenges to be able to just peacefully protest, who've experienced challenges and factions from within the movement itself, and coming together now in this reconciliation of our own movement and understanding that we need to harvest the lessons from the last 2 weeks. We need to harvest the lesson from our international families about the way that they've been experiencing different reactions from the public and from the police in the ways that they've been protesting, and to come together and just really begin that moment of harvesting and reconciling.
Know that we are here as part of a movement, a wave of change that is sweeping the world. Know that that is the movement of movements, which is sweeping across the global south, that is calling for us here at the heart of the system to rebel on behalf of the whole of humanity, on behalf of all of nature. Know that we are nature in rebellion. We are life rebelling for life. And let that sink in, that is who you are. That is what you are.
Being here for these last 2 weeks has been an amazingly uplifting experience. I feel like it's a kind of like some kind of collective upwelling of consciousness that's taken place. I've been to scores and scores of demonstrations and marches in my lifetime. I'm a retired psychiatric nurse, but there's something qualitatively different about Extinction Rebellion.
This climate emergency is the fruit of empire. This climate emergency is the source of our privilege.
As we're standing here, people are just rising up in their energy. We've got the drummers, we've got the flags, and people are really coming here ready to celebrate everything that they've achieved in this last couple of weeks, and also realising that the things that we really, really wanted, which is to actually hear the government's plan, is yet to come.
So you don't look like you're part of this necessarily, but maybe I've got you wrong. What are you making of this?
No, I'm not part of it, but I absolutely support the intention. And yeah, the part of me feels quite, I should be doing a bit more. So which is why we're sort of hanging around here and trying to talk to people and understand more what's going on and what's behind it all.
People of colour, working class people cannot be here because they're doing 2 or 3 jobs. There are millions of people in this country working on 0-hour contracts and are struggling. We need to think about how we can reach them.
My goodness. Thank you for giving yourselves over. Thank you for that sacrifice. We thank you so much. And as we thank you, we're still dreaming. And look around you, look at the words. We're relinquishing, we're surrendering. We know we have to do that. We are here to regenerate and repair. We're here to stop the harm, to make ecocide a law, to make the ecocide a crime against humanity.
We are at the end of the closing ceremony. It's been an incredible moment for us to come together and just honour what has been.
These people coming forward are coming forward from every profession, every tradition, every affinity group. Every tiny corner that has come together to make this rebellion happen has been represented in words, in song, in prayer, in this ceremony. And the vibe is like nothing else.
So we invite you in for the rest of the show just to just be on this vibe with us basically.
Wow, we were on such a high at the end of that.
I think I was mainly on a high at the possibility of resting tomorrow.
Wow, God, yeah. What's your regen dream?
I think my regen, I can't even speak, I'm so tired. My regen dream is, it's a very humble dream. It's basically putting on a bath and listening to Orinoco Flow by Enya.
Wow.
What's your regen dream?
I don't know, I mean, I would quite like to be pretty chill for a few days, I guess, but I'm just keen to keep going. Like, there's so much momentum and so many new connections and so many new ideas and like just this real sense of like growth, you know? I don't even know where I would go, like, to what's next.
Well, I think what's next, at least for the crew that has been so essential in helping us, is rest. I said before that like Jewish phrase, the work is not done, but it's time to stop. And so we'd like to ask the following people who we have huge gratitude to stop working. They being Luke, who's behind the camera, who's just been absolutely massive.
We call him Dad. Hi, Dad.
Who else do we have? We've got Phil, we got
Jay, John. Like, there's been so many people sending in comments and people sending in footage and like all the live streamers. Give it up for the live streamers. Wow. We've had so many incredible media swirls going all around the place. People turning up with cameras and microphones, and just thank you to all of you who are here telling the truth. And really, one thing that I think is going to be true for all of those people, we're holding them with gratitude in our hearts. And the real message right now is, please rest, rebels.
And for those tuning in for the first time, welcome to the rebellion. I'm Sarah Zoltash.
I'm Ronan Harrington, and this is XR TV.